another humiliation for Spurs, another disappointing night in North London for them. Igor Tudor seems completely clueless as it finishes Spurs 1, Crystal Palace 3, and it's a reality now. Absolutely 100% in this relegation fight. West Ham, good run of form. Forest, of course, getting that point yesterday in action against Manchester City. Spurs just 1 point above the relegation zone. Nedum Onuoha joins us. Where should we start? Do you want to start today or just overall?
We'll talk about today, because I think today in itself felt like a must-win game, for Spurs, which we haven't really seen for a long time. We've seen them trending in the wrong direction, but that buffer to the bottom three has still kind of been there. So at times it almost felt like we were dragging them into the bottom sort of 3 or 4 ourselves. But now as you look at it, you see a Forest side who got a great point for them yesterday, and a West Ham side who've been, finding some wins and points in the last few weeks when most people thought they were doomed. I think it was around early December time. So for Spurs, you see the situation they're in. And I think what's alarming from my standpoint is, as I watch them, if something was to happen, it just needed to be an individual that would just do something. Somebody's just running really hard by themselves. And it looks like such a poor Premier League side, relatively speaking, because all those teams around them, beyond them, you've seen the sort of recent rise of Leeds. You've seen what Forest could potentially do. You've seen what West Ham have been able to do on the road and at home in recent weeks, and sort of have that sense of belief. But for Spurs, you see nothing. You've seen a captain in Romero who's been out for 4 games, and now you see your next captain make a mistake which leads to his side going 1-1 and him missing a game now going forward. You've seen Pedro Porro, the third captain, coming off and showing real anger. You've seen him not be able to create much, not be able to defend well, not be able to do much in midfield, and a manager on the sideline who basically said all of those things as well in a press conference. He says, we have no attack, we have no midfield, and we have no defence. So it's hardly inspiring confidence. And now when you get to this sort of stage, unfortunately, somebody who's had experience of this, and whereas in the past you'd look at the fixtures and say, this is where the points are going to come from, all of a sudden every game seems that little bit more difficult, because you're not showing anything on a week-to-week basis now that would make people believe that all of a sudden everything's just going to fit into place, and you'll get the necessary amount of wins to go and keep yourself in the division.
They've lost 5 in a row, Shaka. Yep. They haven't won a Premier League game this year. We're in March.
Mm-hmm. And you just wonder where some kind of respite comes from. And now the challenge here for Spurs is they bring in a new manager, Igor Tudor, over the last few weeks. Nothing has seemed to click. We often talk about a new manager bounce. Mm-hmm. That has not come. You now have a team that's spiralling down towards the bottom 3, who clearly are indisciplined both in their approach, and I'm not sure that anybody has any respect for Igor Tudor. So now, what are these players playing for in terms of, outside of their own professional pride, which you can question at this point, what is the motivation for these players? I'm not sure where it comes from.
What the heck do you do, Nedum? Because you've got Atletico Madrid next week, you've got Liverpool then at the weekend in the Premier League. After that, it's the second leg of the game against Atleti. And then it looks like what has to be a must-win tie at home against Nottingham Forest. What do you do with these Champions League games? How do you approach these?
I think the tough thing for Spurs' situations, because some of this is because they've got so many players injured. That is a factor. It really is. Obviously it's not necessarily going to be the biggest one because there's so many issues with confidence, general dip in form and so on. But those injuries are a big part of it. So I'd be interested to see, this Champions League squad that they have, how deep does it actually go? Because if half of the players are unavailable because of injury, you can't just say, well, we're going to make 11 changes, because you can't. The players that are available now, the ones who will have to play in that game against Atletico Madrid, bearing in mind you still have that game against Liverpool on the weekend, and they need to start getting points on the board. If the next weekend doesn't go their way, before you know it, they're in the bottom 3. They will be in the bottom 3 just like that. So it's such a tough situation to be in, and such a bizarre one as well. When was the last time we saw a team be in the knockout rounds of the Champions League and somehow deservedly in that top 8 be a team that's also thinking they're going to get relegated in the Premier League? I'm sure it might have happened in other leagues elsewhere, but this isn't something we expect to see. In those fixtures, for Forest, they've got some fighting spirit. For West Ham, they've got some fighting spirit and some form. And for Spurs at this moment in time, what do they have over those other 2 sides? Right now, they have nothing. There's not availability, there's not really continuity, there's not really a huge sense of belief. They've not shown anything. As you've said, in the year of 2026, they have not won a game. Their last win was away to Crystal Palace. I think it was on the 28th of December last year. Since then, they've more or less shown nothing apart from the occasional good second half to make people believe that maybe something better's to come. But as you say, you look at those fixtures, finishing the season with Villa, Leeds, Chelsea, Everton. If they needed to win, say, 2 of those games to stay up right now, how many people would say, yeah, that's going to be something that Spurs are going to be able to do?
That's the problem, Shaq, because you look at that and you think, Spurs, they should be able to get something from enough.
Yeah.
But then it's not real Spurs. This is
No, it's not.
2026 Spurs.
Listen, of the 3, I think Forest probably has arguably the hardest run. But when you're when you're near the bottom as you are, the old cliche, no game is easy. I think the big difference, the big differentiator between Forest and West Ham, and I know Spurs were far too close to the bottom 3 last year themselves, but that was 2 managers ago. That's a different kind of pressure. A pressure which Forest and West Ham are more used to. And again, I know what Spurs did last season, but you just wonder if that kind of experience, being able to keep you cool, keep you calm under that pressure, and that's a very different kind of pressure, serves both Forest and West Ham all the better. You've seen Spurs kind of come apart at the seams. You spoke about Porro and his reaction to being substituted. Van der Ven indiscipline in getting sent off. Romero is just about to come back from his 4-match suspension. All these things kind of adding up just points to a Spurs team that are in total disarray. And I'm not sure that they're unified enough to survive the kind of pressure that will come their way. That's on their doorstep.
Talk to me about the psychology. We saw the form there of Forest and West Ham in comparison to Spurs, Nedum. As you said, you've been in relegation fights. The other 2 teams knew they were in a fight for a long time. Spurs, this has kind of crept up on them. How does that affect them mentally going into this final stretch?
I think it's a good question. Obviously, everyone is different, but what I would say in terms of how football is, it's such an interesting game because people's expectations and skill sets are so broad that at times what being really good at playing in Europe is very different to being good at playing in a game domestically when, say, the crowd's on your back and you haven't had any points in like weeks, for example. So for the West Ham players, you know, everyone starts the season wanting to be ambitious. I'm sure it's the same for Forest as well. But very early in the season, you could see that it was heading in the other direction. Like Forest, for example, have had 4 managers. You've had a West Ham side who've been down near the bottom as well. They've had struggles with managers. So they've gone through a tougher time. And they've had those like team meetings where it's like, we need to figure this out. We need to show more character. We need to show more fight. And as a consequence, the makeup of their sides is almost built around that. Whereas I think for this Spurs side, like they can be very good, but they can be very good as front runners. But how does it fall now when teams are coming up against you and they have all the belief in the world that they can bring a fight to you, put you under pressure and you won't be able to back it? I think we've seen in years gone by, whether it be Mourinho, Conte, some other managers as well, have asked questions about the character of this side in terms of what it's like to fight, because they're all good footballers. But can you play like a different type of football that will help you stay in this division right now? I don't think that's the way the squad was built. So anyone playing against them will have a belief that if you turn this into a dogfight, it will favour you more than it will favour them. So for this Spurs side that are down there now, I bet there's never a chance in a second in the first half of the season that they think they'll be involved in a conversation about being down there in this relegation zone, especially after how last year went. But here they are. They're probably not ready for it. They were not planning for it. They're going to have to show a whole different level of like characteristic. But then all of a sudden you ask, like, with all due respect to him, is this why Xavi Simon's side for you? Is this what he thought he was going to be sort of being involved in? You know, and other players like that. This is a very, very specialist thing. And in some ways, you don't want to be the specialist player in a dogfight, but they need to show the personality, the character, the drive, the desire, and the quality that they have. Otherwise, as I say, bizarrely, they could be in the Championship next year.
Spurs desperate for just a glimmer, some hope, some good news. Well, it came today because the Championship now will have 6 playoff spots from next season. Now, just to take you through, obviously, how it stands at the moment, top 2 go through automatically, and then from 3 to 6, they play each other, obviously, into a final. That will now be open to 7th and 8th next season, so there'll be a one-off game, 5th will play 8th, 6th will play 7th. The winners of those 2 games will then play a 2-legged semi-final against Ipswich and Millwall, and then, of course, through to the final at Wembley to see who will be promoted. Do you like this idea, Nedum?
To be honest, I'm not one of those people that's instantly like hesitant towards change. But what I would say about the Championship is that like there are usually, you find the top 2, maybe the third team as well will be a side who's worthy of essentially going up to the Premier League. But as you drop down further into those playoff positions, the drop in quality is like quite significant. And it's not to say that they can't get promoted from being in 6th or 7th or 8th, as we'll see. But is that team going to be in a position to be able to compete in the Premier League for the next season? I'm not 100% sure. They can find form towards the back end of the year, win some consecutive games and be in the mix. But I don't know, it feels like they're trying to bring more games in as such. But I'd like to see the teams that are the most consistent throughout the season get a chance to play for the Premier League. But as we even saw within that graphic there, the team that's in 8th now is 12 points behind the team that's in 3rd. Come the end of the season, that could be 15, 20 points, maybe more. And the fact that they'll both be contesting to try and be in the Premier League. And, we've spent years talking about how those 3 teams who come up anyway sometimes almost feel underprepared. But what chance would there be if the team that gets promoted is also somebody that finishes, on maybe 65 points from 46 games in the Championship? So I'm not fully sold on it, but time will tell as to whether it produces sides who are ready for the step up.
I'm with Nedum in that. I'm not sold on it at all. I think, the Football League is trying to involve more teams later on in the season, which, other than making money out of those extra couple of games, I'm not sure it really works out.
Makes it more fun, more competitive, more to talk about.
Does it really make it more competitive?
You've got those teams in the mid-table, haven't got anything to play for. Now they've got something to strive for.
Right, but you're talking about 2 teams in 3rd and 4th who will get a bye. The other 2 teams who will play against those, have to now play another 2 games on the back of what is already a 46-game league season, never mind if any of them go in any cup runs. I just feel it kind of already gives those teams even more...
do better in the season, then you'll be higher up.
Well, yeah, you could win the league and just go straight up, and then we're not even having this discussion. To that point, I think if you want to shake up the playoffs, and I am a big fan of certainly the way they do it in Bundesliga and other leagues in Europe, is 3rd bottom play, whoever finishes top of the playoff bracket or whatever, to stay in, rather than just kind of expanding down deeper into the Championship.